Yeah. All right. So what we're going to do this morning, friends, is
High tech.
attack.
High tech.
High tech.
Attack, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All of that. We're going to raise a number of questions, a total probably of 11 questions, and really answer them all with one answer. So the first part will just be the questions. So you're looking at the beginning of Magid. It's item number 5 of the 15 steps of the Seder, and Magid is the story of the Exodus. So it begins with this famous paragraph. Let's read it. Lachma Anya Mitzrayim. This is the bread of affliction that our forefathers ate in the land of Egypt. Called Dich ven Yosef v'Yechol, all who are hungry, let them come and eat. Called Ditzrich Yosef Yifsach, all who are needy, let them come celebrate Pesach with us. Hashata Hacha, now we're here. Lashana Ba Ba'ad the Israel, next year may we be in Israel. Hashata Avda, now we're servants, slaves. Lashana Ba B'nei Chedin, next year may we be free. Here are the questions. Number 1, what does this have to do with Magid? This is not the story of Passover here. The story of Passover begins, the next paragraph, when the child asks the questions and gets the answer. There's no story of Passover here, so why is it part of Magid? That's the first general question. Now let's analyze each one of the sentences independently, because there are 3 sentiments or 3 statements here.
Why is it partly Aramaic?
It's in Aramaic.
Isn't there some Hebrew also?
No, it's actually, that's another question. Why it's Aramaic classically is, the classic answer is because we're saying we're now here as slaves, next year free. We don't want the Gentiles who knew Hebrew to understand this. So it's composed in Aramaic so that it shouldn't be in their face. We plan a rebellion and we want to be free. That's one answer. Another answer is it's an invitation, inviting someone. The Aramaic was the language of the Talmud, so you use the common vernacular. There are other answers as well. At any rate, so let's look at the first sentence. So we say that this is the bread of affliction that our forefathers ate in the land of Egypt. Now it is true that the night before they left Mitzrayim, they were commanded to observe the first Seder in history, and that involved eating matzah. However, we say explicitly later in the Seder otherwise. In the Seder we point to the matzah and we say, this bread, why do we eat it? And we say because our forefathers, God revealed himself to them in Egypt, and there wasn't enough time for their dough to bake when they left Egypt. So we're eating matzah because their dough did not rise when they left. How do we say here, pointing to the matzah, that this is they ate in Egypt? No, it baked when they left, and they ate it afterwards. And that's why we eat matzah, for what happened when they left. That's the first question on that sentiment, or that statement. Then the next statement is an invitation. And the obvious question is, it's a pointless invitation because nobody can hear you. You're already at home. You're already well into the Seder. This is the 5th step. You've made Kiddush already. And the invitations have to be done before you come home from shul. At very least, better still, weeks in advance. So what's the point of this grand, anybody who wants, come and eat? Really? You really mean that? No one can hear you. So what's the point of this invitation? We might also ask, everything in Torah is precise, why is it broken up into 2 sentences when it can be 1 sentence? We say, whoever are hungry, let them come and eat. Whoever needy, let them come and celebrate Passover with us. Say it this way, whoever is hungry and needy, let them come, eat and celebrate Passover with us. Just merge it into 1 sentence. Why make it 2 sentences? That was question number 3. All right. Question on the next statement. The most powerful question of all. We say now we're here. Next year may we be in the land of Israel. Now we're slaves. Next year may we be free. Now we're here next year in Israel. Okay, we hope to be in Israel. Now we're slaves. Next year we're free. But are we not celebrating freedom tonight? Isn't this whole point? The whole point of the Seder and of Pesach altogether is that we are B'nei Chayrin. We are free, and that's what we're celebrating. And here we make a statement that fairly undermines and destroys everything. We're not. So what's the whole celebration? What does it mean? So that's a very strong question on the last statement.
It says we're slaves.
And it says we're slaves. Are we?
You could just...
Maybe spiritually in some, we're beholden to the nations. But we're certainly saying here we're not free. And that fairly undermines or contradicts what tonight is all about and our declaration throughout the Seder that we're free. We eat lean when we eat the matzah to demonstrate our freedom and aristocracy and what have you. The whole point is this is Man Cheruseinu, the festival of our freedom. We said that in the Kiddush just moments earlier. And now we say, no, we're not free. And finally, what's the connection between the three statements? You have a paragraph, friends. So a paragraph means a singular idea. There's three statements here that on the surface don't appear to have any connection. First we say, this is the bread they ate in Egypt. Then we make an invitation, and we say next year may be free. Why they're lumped together as if it's one unified idea, it doesn't appear to be. That was question number 5. Now, there is an answer, the commentaries answer with respect to the connection between the first two statements. And they say like this: when you invite a Jew, since all Jews are considered princes, sons of kings, then you're obligated to feed them a feast like Solomon's feast. Mind you, that's also true if you hire a Jew. He has the right to demand, if you're feeding him, to feed him. So you have to tell him before, this is what I'm giving you to eat, and this is the menu. If he agrees. Otherwise, he, by right, can demand a sumptuous feast. So that's what we say. We're making an invitation, but we're saying before, I want you to know what the menu is. The menu is, it's only poor man's bread. So that's the answer that is offered to connect the first and second statement. It doesn't explain the third, the connection, but explains the first two. But this answer is not really satisfying, because the fact is we do eat more than just matzah. So if we're giving him the menu, so give him the menu. So we need to probe deeper and understand the connection between the first and the second and the third statement, and why they're all together in one paragraph. All right, so let's quickly summarize the questions. Let's not try and answer them, let's try and just remember the questions. The first question was on Magid itself, on the fact that this
is the bread that we eat.
The first question we had, the first question was on Magid itself, the Passover story. This is not the Passover story, so why did this appear under the heading Magid? That was the first question. Second question, you were saying?
With the bread, why did we eat this in Egypt when we never ate it in Egypt?
No, we did. We were commanded to eat matzah the night before they left Egypt. They did eat matzah in Egypt. That's not our question. Our question is what?
It was the matzah that was because God had commanded us to leave, and
they ate matzah then, fine, but that's not why we're eating matzah. We say explicitly that we eat matzah not in commemoration of what they ate in Egypt the night before. That's not why we eat it. We eat because what happened when they left. So why are we saying that? Pointing to the matzah they ate. That's not why we're eating it. We're not questioning if they ate matzah. They did, as I mentioned. The first Seder in history was the night before the Exodus. It's not the question. The question is, that's not the reason, however, that we eat matzah. Then, the question on the next statement.
The third thing about the invitation is pointless.
Invitation is pointless. Nobody can hear you. And then we ask the detail on the invitation. Why make 2 sentences when it can be 1 sentence? And finally, on the third statement,
why are we slaves if we're celebrating freedom?
We're supposed to be celebrating freedom. What on earth does this mean? And then another question was a general question. What's the connection between all these 3 statements? Why are they lumped together in one paragraph? What's the connection? All right, so they are the basic questions, 7 questions or so. Turn the page, friends. We're going to answer this by asking more questions. So turn it over. It's the back behind there. So the 4 sons, are all familiar with the 4 sons. What's the order of the 4 sons? The wise, then comes the wicked, then comes the simple, and then comes the one who doesn't know how to ask. Now, the famous question is, why in that order? You'd think that the wicked would be at the end. So some want to say, well, we're putting them in order of intelligence. The wise is obviously the most intelligent. The wicked has a question. The simple one has a vague question. And the 4th one has no question at all. However, really, there's no indication anywhere that they really are of different intelligence. They're actually all equally intelligent. And it's a question of their involvement, their religious standing. So the most difficult to reach is the one who has no questions, because he's just totally disinterested. And less difficult a little bit is the one who is at least politely asks a vague question, that's the Tom, And the Rasha, therefore, is placed next to the wise son because he is the easiest to reach, because he has a question and he feels it's not for me. He's moved. He's moved. He say, what's this for you? He's excluding himself. There is some engagement. So because there is some engagement and he's affected, so we can engage this child or this son and draw him near. So that's the reason he's put second. At least one of the reasons is because after the wise, he's really the easiest to deal with. The most difficult is the last one. And as we pointed out in previous years, in dealing with the last one who doesn't know how to ask, not because he doesn't have the intelligence, just doesn't care to ask anything. He's so bored waiting for it to be over. So the reason that how do we deal with him? Our goddess says it's not in front of us, but at psachlo, using the feminine. You, like in French, you have you. It's different if he's talking to a man or woman, not in English. Hebrew also. If he's speaking to a male, it's ata. Talking to a female, it's at. All of a sudden, we're talking to the female. As we explained previously, is because to reach this child, you need to have the feminine approach, which is to nurture. You can't, because he's not interested. If he's asking a question, you can counter. He's not asking anything. So how do you reach it from the inside? You've got to make him comfortable and nurture. So it's a feminine approach. That's the final one. But again, we're saying that the wicked one is second because he's engaged and he is animated and he's angry and it's you and not me. There's a stake here. So that's why he's the second. That's all leading up to our question. So we've just acknowledged that we put the wicked one second because there's somebody to talk to here. Now comes our question. What do we say to him? Look, he says you. And what do we tell him?
Doesn't apply to you.
Yeah, you. So you're excluding yourself. Well, have you know, had you been in Egypt, you wouldn't have been redeemed. So the question is, what kind of response is this? What you're just affirming that he's on the outside. You close the door, slam the door in his face. That's the approach. We put him next to the wise son. By the way, for another reason, the wise son should have an influence on him. It's kind of metaphoric. The wise son should look after him. So we put him second, as we just said moments ago, because he's engageable. So now how do we engage him? By closing the door in his face. Draw him near, for God's sakes. Be makar of him. Why are we saying, yeah, had you been there, you wouldn't have been redeemed? It seems the most dismissive answer possible. Why are we doing that? Yeah.
Because you gave us the answer.
Yeah, we talked about
I
this.
said you in Egypt, but you're not in Egypt. You're here now.
Exactly. We're going to get to that again. Okay. And finally, just another question. Turn the page. A final little nuanced question. In the Dayenu, at the end, we thank God. We go through all the things that he did. Dayenu would have been sufficient. And finally, had he brought us into the land of Israel, not built for us the Lebana Lono base Habchira. The translation says quite simply, not build the temple. But the question is, the usual term for temple is Bet HaMikdash. Why are we calling the temple here Bet HaBchira, which literally means the house of God's choice? An unusual expression. Why? Why not use the usual expression common throughout the entire Talmudic literature, and scripture for that matter, Beit HaMikdash? Why the change here? All right, so that's the end of that list of questions. Let's go back now to the very beginning and answer everything. Our first question was, remember the very first question?
But the matzah.
The very first question, was
What has this got to do
with
the
Magid.
story of-
What's this got to do with the story of Passover? That's the very first question. Magid. So friends, the answer now to that question, everything is as follows. The child, or the intelligent child, or any participant at the Seder, looks around at the Seder table, and he knows history. He also learns in Cheder, and he has disturbing questions that prevent him from this whole celebration. Something disturbing doesn't add up. And I'll soon tell you what those questions are, and we'll see how this paragraph answers them. And why it's the introduction. Now we can get on with the story. So what is it that the child is bothered with is as follows. He knows that God took us out of Egypt. He learned this all in Cheder. His question is, God granted us freedom. We didn't break out of Egypt on our own. Actually, there were some Jews that did, and they didn't survive. They were beaten and destroyed. So, question: had we gotten out on our own steam, our own effort, good. So we were free for a certain time, and then that could be followed by further subjugation to foreign nations, what have you. Nothing human being does is forever. But when God grants you something, that's to be expected to be eternal. So God granted us our freedom. How is it, he knows Jewish history, that Jews have suffered in exiles even worse than Egypt? What happened to the freedom? And he may be looking around the Seder table and he sees his grandfather, grandmother, who are survivors. And he knows what they went through, and that was far worse than Egypt. So what happened to the freedom? What are we celebrating? If God granted it, it should be forever, and no power or force in the world should be able to take it away. And yet it was. How could this be? And in similar vein, he's also bothered. He looks around the table and he sees there are poor people that can't afford a Seder, and his parents have graciously invited them, or don't know how to, whatever the case may be. And he's wondering, poor people? He knows the story of the Exodus. God granted us wealth. In fact, he promised this to Abraham. They'll go out with wealth. What happened to the wealth? If we earned it throughout the toil of our own hands, you make money, you lose money. It's no guarantee. But it's not that we made the money. It was given to us as a divine promise. So if it's given as a divine promise, it should be forever. How are there poor Jews? Not just today, but for thousands of years. These are disturbing questions. And similarly, not a stronger question, but similarly, he sees the wicked son at the table. He knows the story. The story was that the wicked perished in Egypt. Only the righteous came out. In fact, 80%, it was discussed last week, remained in Egypt. So they're only righteous. How's there a wicked son?
I thought 20% realized.
I said the opposite. So 80% remained, 20% went out. Yeah. So the wicked remained behind. So why is there a wicked son? Where does this come from? So the piety didn't last either. Nothing lasted. Not the freedom, not the wealth, or the piety, or the virtue. And these are disturbing questions that prevent him from, so what's our celebration? So to answer this, before we get into any of the details of why this night is different and so on, these questions have to be addressed, and they are by this cryptic paragraph, which we'll now revisit and understand its deeper meaning, and we'll see that it answers the child's questions and all the questions we had too. So let's begin our journey revisiting the paragraph. So the first sentence says, this is the bread of affliction, right, that our forefathers ate in the land of Egypt. And our question, Alan, was on this question. What was our question on this statement?
I'm afraid to say the answer.
Not the
You're
answer.
gonna knock me down again.
I'm not asking the answer. I'm just about you to repeat the question. It's true they ate matzah in Egypt. However, what's our question?
It's not the bread.
It's not why we eat matzah. We eat matzah because what happened when they went out of Egypt. And yet the Haggadah is saying they were eating matzah that they ate in Egypt. The Haggadah is saying, here is the opening salvo, the big news of the night. We never left Egypt. We never left. There was not a complete redemption. The whole question of the child is, there was a redemption, why didn't it last? Freedom was granted, why didn't it last? Where's the wealth? The opening statement is saying, dear child, participants, the matzah we ate, of course we all know, we eat matzah because that happened when they left, but the truth is here they left physically, but in some state they still remain in Egypt. That's what's being stated here. In other words, there was never a complete redemption. Now bear with me as we continue our discussion. The next sentence, what was our question on the next sentence? The next sentence is what?
Oh, we're hungry.
An invitation, and no one can hear you. And how does it follow from what we just said? First of all, the statement in its own right, what's the point of this invitation? And what's the connection to the statement before? Now the answer. This is not an invitation. It's an acknowledgement. There's a need to invite. It goes like this. There's a therefore. Because we never left Egypt, therefore nothing lasted. That's why there are poor people that need to be dealt with, because the riches, nothing was permanent. Because the opening statement has posited this very shocking fact that We never left in some sense, and therefore there's a need to invite. It's not a real invitation, obviously, but it's acknowledging that we need to invite. And we asked also, why did we divide it into two? Because acknowledgement here is poor on two levels. There's physically poor people, the wealth didn't last, and there's a wicked son, morally and spiritually poor, the piety didn't last either. Why? Because of the opening statement. They went out, but they still were in Egypt. And now the obvious question is, okay, close the Haggadah, and then what do we celebrate? What do we celebrate? We're celebrating that although we are slaves and here now, but the key to redemption is in our hands, given to us on this night. What does that mean? Let's visit the wicked son again, as was pointed out earlier. What was our question on the wicked son? Not on him, really on us. We asked what? What did we ask about that paragraph? We asked a question on our response. Why are we excluding him? We tell him, look, read it. Someone read it. Alan, read it for us. You may therefore, last 4 lines of the wicked son.
Where's the wicked son? What is the meaning of this?
You may therefore, the last 4 lines of the wicked son, this is our answer.
You may therefore set his teeth on edge and say to him, this is done because of what the Lord did for me when I came forth from Egypt. For me and not for him, had he been there, he would not have been redeemed.
So our question was, we just acknowledge, remember, we put him number 2 because he's engaged, and here we slam the door in his face. This is a Jewish approach. Here's how we deal with a Jewish child. Parenthetically, I want to point out that there's a 5th child who doesn't even show up to the Seder. The Rabbi says that's where our focus has to be. The kid is not even here. And it's too late now. You've got to devote your attention to him before you sit down tonight so that he comes to the Seder. But we put him number 2, he said, because he's engaged. He's the most easiest to affect because he's stirred. So what are we doing? Slamming the door in his face? What kind of answer is this? As we just heard from the doctor earlier, it's the most affirmative answer possible. Because this is what we're saying to him. We're saying, my tired kind, my dear child, had you been in Egypt, you're saying, it's not for me, I don't want any part of this. Had you been there before the Exodus, we had this option. 80% we said before didn't want to go and didn't. But we are now post-Exodus. And what happened from the moment of the Exodus is, a Jew is a Jew forever, and that spark can never be extinguished. Had you been there, but you're not there. You're the same Jew as me and Moses and everybody else. That's what this answer is saying. The emphasis, then you had an option. But now you don't. You're the same Jew as me, so why are we fighting this? Let's celebrate our Yiddishkeit. You are the same. It's the most affirmative. This is the unspoken word. Had you been there, continue, but you're not there. We are all celebrating tonight the eternal identity of a Jew. A Yid, a Jew is a Jew is a Jew, and nothing I can do can change that. I can scream from today till tomorrow. I'm not interested. I can marry out. I can embrace another faith. I can behave in a way that's destructive and inconsistent with everything Jewish. I'm still a Jew. That core remains. Back to the opening paragraph. What we're saying now is, what are we celebrating tonight? We're celebrating tonight that we can complete the process of redemption that God began and didn't complete. So let's zero in, make it very clear. What's the celebration of Pesach? We said it was never a complete redemption. That's true. But something did happen, something extraordinary. And that is, God began the process of redemption. And what is that God did? Guaranteed forever that the Jewish spark will remain. And therefore, it's up to me to decide tonight or any time to reveal that and live Jewishly and complete my personal redemption. What does redemption mean? It means to liberate, to free. What's a free person? Who liberates who he is. So who am I? The depth of me? Well, we're all the same, the Jew. And so freedom means to give that expression. I can do that. The key the key to redemption, which is my own Jewish identity, that was given to us on this night, and that's what we're celebrating. And we can be in Jerusalem now, whenever. We can achieve personal and collective redemption. Let's do so tonight. That's the big celebration. So, was it a complete redemption? No. But something did happen at the core level. The core level, God took care of that. And we got the next stage. Embrace your Jewishness. Redeem it. Express it. Live Jewishly. That's my choice. That's the big celebration. And that's what we're saying to the wicked son. Then you could walk away. But the celebration tonight is that whether we like it, embrace it or not, we are eternally Jewish. Born Jewish, that's it.
There's no opting out.
There's no opting out. So let's stop denying who we are, embrace our own truth, and give it expression, and live and breathe and talk and act and live like Jews, consistent, true to our core identity. So all the questions have been answered. One question was left. Why do we call it what? Why do we call the temple God's choice? Because and that's the final statement of the whole narrative. It crystallizes it. God chose us on this night, and he ain't changing his mind. If we just said holy temple, okay, holy temple. You want to emphasize Bechira. That's what happened at the moment of the Exodus. The chosenness of the Jewish people happens at the Exodus. That's the birth of our people. In the words of Ezekiel, Yechezkel the prophet, lay that Am Yisrael. God choose your mind forever. I will never let you go. As we talked about yesterday in Shul. I will never let you go. That would matter what you do. I'm holding you. And that Yiddish, that spark, it forever burn. That's the celebration. It's the divine choice that's irrevocable. And that's why what we finished the whole narrative with evoking that metaphor or the imagery or the truth of the choice. Not the holy house, the chosen house. It's a metaphor for our whole identity as being chosen. So in summary, all the questions are answered. Why does this appear under the banner Magid? Where's the story here? It's an introduction to the story that makes the story make sense. Because this kid is asking, what are we celebrating tonight? Nothing lasted. What's the point? Auschwitz was worse than Egypt. What were they celebrating in Auschwitz? And there were Jews that did celebrate. Somehow they smuggled in, I don't know what they did. They sometimes a matzah, a crumb, and the tin cup. This was the 4 cups. Hello? This is worse than Egypt. What are they? They knew what they were celebrating without even saying it. The eternal Jew. We will outlive them physically. We will survive them. Am Yisrael Chai forever. And moreover, they can enslave us and break us. But the core, this can never take away from me. That I am a Yid, no one can take. They can't snuff that out. And that's what they were really celebrating in the darkest moments of our history. Without going through, they knew this. They knew it intuitively. The spirit, that spark, was on fire with them in these dark moments. That was the Seder in the deepest way. They didn't have the matzah and the wine and all the trimmings that we do. But the core essence of what Pesach is all about, the indomitable eternal Jew, they embodied that. So that's what we're saying to the child. You should know, you're right. It wasn't a complete redemption. We have to complete it. It's a partnership with God. So what are we celebrating? That we're always going to be able to. We can always do teshuvah. We can always redeem ourselves. We can always choose to live Jewishly, no matter what we've done in our lives, because that spark, God has guaranteed from this moment, will never be extinguished. As I mentioned yesterday, it's a milestone this year. It's exactly 3,300, actually, no, from the Exodus, it's 3,331 years. The sanctuary is a year later. So it's 3,331 years that we're celebrating the miracle or the eternity of the Jewish identity. Right? And we answered all the questions. It's an acknowledgement of an invitation. It's acknowledgement that we are in slavery of all kinds, physical and spiritual. Canada were living a good life, but there were times that Jews were literally enslaved. Still, in all of that, the key, the spark is forever there. Clear? So friends, hope you share this at your Seder. At your Seder, we do that? Maybe it's an inspiring message, I think, for everybody.
So in your words, they never left Egypt for thousands of years.
We have not completed the process. The redemption, when Mashiach comes, it's completion of that process. So we never left completely. What didn't believe? The core was redeemed. But our conscious behavior and so on, that's up for us to do. So it's teshuvah, living Jewishly, that will redeem our core essence of the soul, and that then will lead to the complete redemption. So in simple language, the key to redemption is in our hands. And it was given at the Exodus.
So we're celebrating the opportunity.
The profound opportunity to complete our own personal collective redemption, which God guaranteed we can never lose. The message is so, as we said yesterday,
The opportunity is
always there. No
always
Jew should ever give up on himself, and we should never give up on any Jew. No Jew can be written out. In Egypt, back then, yes, but no longer. Sham, there. But we're not there anymore, because now God took us out. So that's the celebration. That's an extraordinary celebration.
Now, my question from
Yeah.
yesterday, that you said you wanted to touch this morning.
Ah, yes, you just reminded me. So,
The question was,
yeah.
God created man in his image. What does that mean, in his image?
Right, it's a verse in Genesis, and it's also quoted often. And your question is, God has no image, surely, right? So what does it mean? That's your question.
The question is, God created man in his image.
And your
So
question
what does
is
it
God-
mean in his image?
Your question being, God doesn't have an image.
Well, no, that's not my question.
That
My
should be-
question is,
well,
what does it
okay,
mean? Does God have an image?
So let's
Or
answer your
is
question.
God
Right.
imagine that's what, is it his imagination, or is it that, or is it his image?
So let's answer the question by asking a question.
Okay.
How is it possible that God has an image of any kind? Image means a definition and a description,
Right.
and God is surely infinite. So what does that statement mean? Before we get to man, how does it apply to God, right? So the answer is, yes, true. God himself transcends all description or images. However, he has chosen to manifest himself or relate to us via an image. The image here are the attributes: kindness, judgment, compassion, wisdom. They're the images we speak of.
Obviously.
Not physical, but they're not him either. He transcends that. But it's a choice, because he wants a relationship with us to manifest himself in descriptive ways. That's the image. Again, these attributes. Man is made in the same image. We possess intelligence and emotions mirroring the divine image, and that's the point. So there's a relationship. We can speak about God's wisdom because we also have properties of wisdom. Talk about God's love because the human heart has the capacity to love. So we are made in that image. So in summary, the answer to your question is, the image of God is God's chosen way by which he projects his presence via a set of attributes. We are made in that same mold. Why? So that there be a relationship. We can understand and talk about his behavior and so on, because we have the same thing on a human scale: intelligence, emotions, etc. And we can emulate God. We can use our attributes to behave the way God does in Torah, compassionately, etc., etc. Answered your question? Good. All right, friends. Yep. So next week, what's next week?
Hundreds of hours of Chassidus from that question.
Yeah. Endless hours of Chassidus.
What's next week?
Yeah, I guess so. Huh?
Last, there'll be a break after
Yeah,
next week.
yeah, yeah. All right, friends. We'll continue, God willing. Huh?
Just think, we are